Hello, everyone, and welcome to our guest speaker session today. I'm really excited to have Salar Chagpar, CEO and Chief Visioneer of Prepper, here with us today. Welcome, Salar.
Thanks, Caitlin. I'm happy to be here and excited to go through this interview with you.
Perfect. So Salar is an experienced change catalyst and business growth engineer. He helps individuals, teams, and organizations solve complex problems. With over 10 years of public and private sector experience and an interdisciplinary skill set, he helps provide guidance through every stage of the business journey. With a vision towards building the global education landscape through the power of the crowd and open source, he co-founded Prepper, a nonprofit social enterprise with offices in the United States and Canada. And as CEO and Chief Visioneer at Prepper, he guides Prepper's strategy from outreach to product visioneering and partnerships. Salar is really a wealth of experience. He has worked with many businesses over the years, everything from startups to medium-sized enterprise, and we're really looking forward to learning a bit more from your experience and sharing some inspiring stories today.
Awesome. Thanks, Caitlin, for that introduction.
So you have been an entrepreneur for a long time. You started more than 10 different companies from the time you were 16. Tell us a bit about that journey and what you've learned along the way.
Yeah, it's actually been an interesting journey. My first dabble into entrepreneurship was as an intrapreneur. So I was 15 or 16 years old. I was working at a camera store called Japan Camera. I know camera stores, right? We're in 2020. That seems like ages ago. It feels like ages ago. Um, when people used to still have film. I don't know if probably some of the people on this call have never seen film, but there used to be cameras with 35 millimeter film, and Japan Camera used to process this film when we used to actually print photos back in the day. And I had this lady come into the store to get an old baby photo of her daughter. It was her daughter's birthday. She came in on a Monday. The birthday was on a Friday, and she wanted to restore this old photo of her daughter. That a part of that picture was missing. It was torn. So at that point, we used to send out these requests to digitally restore the image because we didn't have the skills internally at Japan Camera. It was a franchise. And so we sent it out for a quote. It came back within 24 hours, and they estimated something like $350. I phoned up the lady, asked her to come in to pick up her photo and to make a decision. And she was like $350, and she got really emotional. And I started getting emotional because it was her daughter's birthday. I grew up with two sisters, so I was like, please don't cry. Give us some time. Go home. Let me see what I can do. And at that time, we used to have these cameras too called DSLRs, basically digital SLRs, right? Before the evolution of us all having cameras in our phones, DSLRs were a hybrid of like single lens reflex when you used to have lenses on cameras. And those cameras used to come with Photoshop. So this is like 2005. Photoshop 5 was out. So this is way back. I've never used Photoshop, so I asked the owner, "Can I borrow this CD?" Because these cameras were like $2,000, and Photoshop license was in there. And then we used to have one of those Kodak kiosks, which they still have them in Walmart, but they're all digital now. And there was a high quality scanner. So I took the photo, did a high quality scan, took the Photoshop CD. 8 hours later, I self-taught myself Photoshop and restored the section of the image that was missing. And I went pixel by pixel, cloning pixels from one side of the image. And like, I don't know, I figured it out somehow because I didn't want her to come back and cry. That was my goal, is make sure she leaves happy. So I fixed it, saved it on a CD, burned it on a CD. I know, right? People used to write things on CDs. Brought it to the Kodak kiosk machine, printed it by plugging in the CD into that machine when it used to take CDs. And she came back, and I told the owner, okay, well, I did the work. You're paying me minimum wage. Why don't you give me 30% of whatever we sell this for? Let's charge her 10% of what the estimate was. So it was, instead of $400, I got the store charged her $40, and I took 20% on top of my hourly wage. Um, so that was my first dabbling into entrepreneurship as an entrepreneur because I didn't start a business. I realized the need of this thing was too excessive. We didn't have the skills internally. I didn't have the skills. So I went home. I was just motivated to solve this challenge of, the price is too high and there's a need for her to get this image. So that started my journey into really being interested in just graphics and visual design. And from there, I started my own company the year after. It's called Ibex Imaging. And I started doing custom websites and custom designs. And from there, I remember every time I go through kind of solving one of these challenges that ended up turning into some sort of business opportunity. Um, I quickly, after learning the key skills to be able to do that, because, we went from like doing video production and graphic design to web design. And then I got bored of that. I kept getting bored in my early, those 15, right? I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew I liked solving challenges and commercializing the ability to solve into some sort of monetary function and to continue to propel that. And so that got me really interested in technology, and I started doing custom e-commerce websites. Now we're in 2006, 2007, and I partnered with a .NET developer that we went to high school with, and we were doing that. And from there, it just continued to evolve, and me continue to see what types of challenges was I passionate about. So that was part of the journey of going through 10 different, more than 10 different industries, right? So we went from like web design, graphic design for small businesses to e-commerce to then I started a franchise software business because we partnered with a printing shop that wanted to become like the UPS store that you see. Um, and that was really interesting. I spent a year actually like hiring a freelancer in Thailand to do a 3D model of an ideal store. And then I hired contractors to take that 3D rendering and actually build the store while me and my partner actually built a franchise management software system using Ruby on Rails. And I loved points. So, kind of taking a break from the startup journey, the way I immigrated to Canada back in 1994. And so when I came to Canada, Pizza Hut had this learning reading program where if you read 10 books, summarize those books, they would give you a free personal pizza. I love food. I love pizza. So I read like 100 books. They kicked me out of ESL after the first year of being in Canada. But this gamification of learning kind of stuck in my brain, right? And so I loved points and somehow using points to incentivize people or motivate people to take specific actions, whether it helps a business or now evolution of all of those journeys. We've kept that kind of logic and brought those game mechanics into the prepper platform. So I think that was kind of interesting, and you really don't know, right? Like the what I loved about that whole process was continually learning all the things that I didn't know, right? Like I went from, there was a need of this lady coming in to get the photo fixed for her daughter's birthday. So to solve that need, I had a skills gap of Photoshop, and I learned Photoshop, and I was able to deliver that solution. And that was kind of the same kind of mindset of, okay, I wanted to build an e-commerce store. That's where I kind of, I captured the requirements, did the UI, UX, but I didn't want to code it because that's not where my strong suits were. And I partnered with, someone that could complement my skills while I continued to evolve that process. And that kind of went on to doing police training after the franchise. thing. We did some custom software development projects, police training. All the police officers in Canada have probably gone through some sort of training that we've created to prepare them to actually pass their police foundations exam. And then we expanded that to Australia, US. I got bored. I'm like, this is, it's very mundane. Okay, police training, what's unique about it? So after I solved the challenge of doing it better than the competition, I got bored and left that. Ultimately, that whole journey led me to learning a whole bunch of things that I didn't know. And the biggest lesson was learning how to listen, right? Like taking a step back, checking your ego, especially when you're young. You think you know, and you realize quickly how much you don't. And so I think it was probably in 2009 when I started, uh, 2008, 2009, when I started pursuing my project management professional designation, is where I really kind of checked myself and intentionally started to build a whole network of experts and advisors that know more than me in all the areas that I don't know, and kept surrounding myself and learned how to listen. Right? It doesn't matter if you're younger than me, if you're older than me, if you don't know as much in a certain area. I think everybody has some sort of uh, wisdom to offer, and I think it's important. Like when you're going through critical thinking or rational thinking, it's important to listen, investigate, and then make your own decisions. But if you shut your ears off and you don't have the ability to kind of listen to your team members, whether it's in a project that you're working on in school, or you're working on a project in a workplace and you're working with a manager, I think it's really important to listen, digest, analyze, and then speak up once you've had the chance to do that. And it's hard. It's like a combination of active listening and analytic reasoning, and being able to kind of digest things, and also be able to take criticism well, right? Like a lot of people, um, when they first get their first set of criticism, especially if you're starting up something, or like you're coming up with a new concept or a new idea to present to your boss, or you're uh, looking to sell that concept to customers. The early rejections are some of the most important rejections, because that's where you can collect the best feedback. And um, I think that's kind of the thin red line across all of the startup experiences that I've had. So hopefully that answered your question. I think I kind of went into multiple
And then
subpoints.
some. You touched on a really interesting component, though, the fact that that journey transitioned you from, really being more so in a service-based business. So you were delivering websites and then eventually e-commerce sites. And then at some point, you identified a need or desire to build a product, a technology product, and the number in particular. Can you talk to us a little bit about, your experiences in each of those things? Because I know that, certainly for a lot of the participants in the program, they have experience building, websites. Some of them have some software development background or are interested in that. But tell us a little bit about, that journey, that transition from service to product, and what that's meant.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, making that shift, like one of the things that I loved about building products is your ability to continuously learn from the data that you're capturing, whether that data is qualitative or quantitative, in the sense, you're talking to users, you're collecting feedback from users, or, you're analyzing research, and you're making incremental changes. Whereas, like, web development, design, a lot of those things where you've completed the service, you've shipped it out, and it's the mindset of, okay, I'm done, this is over. There's no need for continuous iteration and continuous improvement, right? And this connects really well with like CI/CD, which is a principle of developer operations, or DevOps, and it's core to product development teams, right? Because the whole mindset is that you're learning from your production environment, and you're feeding the loop of what you've learned from your product when it's in production, and you're pushing that back into the development team so that they can improve. I think there's something very gratifying about removing the roadblocks of users to simplify the key tasks that they're looking to perform over and over again in a product environment versus like in a information website. Not to say that you can't apply those same principles to web development. There's a whole concept that comes out of HubSpot, growth driven design, GDD. And so they've applied the agile sprint framework to a website where you're kind of doing the same thing as what you would do in a product, to the website, and you're analyzing to see, okay, how can I improve it? How can I make sure that users click on the call to actions, complete the forms, improve their automation journey once they've given us the information so that they can, ultimately resolve the need that they were looking for in the first place to come to that website. And at the same time, it creates business value for the organization that is leveraging that, right? And e-commerce is a great example, right? Like looking at e-commerce journeys, um, any sort of like transactional, or there must be some sort of goal or completion, even on both sides. The thing with product is there's so many uh, pathways, there's so many ways you can, continue to evolve it, and I think that's the exciting part about building a product. And at the same time, it's the scary part of if you don't understand these principles and you're building in a cocoon, or in a silo, which we've all been guilty of doing. But now there's generally accepted principles of like agile or lean development, lean products. There's so much um, methods and processes out there that will kind of guide you through um, building something it's actually useful. It's not just based on your assumptions, and validating those assumptions with the users kind of at the center point, I think is the exciting part about building
Yeah.
products that are actually usable.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So certainly an interesting journey, like a lot of different experiences. And then I know, a number of years ago, well, I guess it's going back quite a few years ago now, you sort of put some of your entrepreneurial journeys on hold, and you joined the Business Development Bank of Canada, and you did consulting there, working with a lot of small businesses. You did solution development. Tell us a little bit about that experience, why you took that leap, and, what you gained from that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I had a unique opportunity in 2012, um, where I was exploring two different pathways. I was looking at scaling a product and looking for investors, and at the same time exploring what is my next challenge. And so at the BDC, the Business Development Bank of Canada, um, there was this entrepreneurial startup team that had just formed to come and create systematic frameworks for making Canadian businesses more digital or digital first, right? So it was a small team of 4 people in an organization of 2,000, where we had privy to be creative like a startup and test things and create things and come up with solutions that would help Canadian SMEs. And for me, at that point, in terms of my entrepreneurial journey, I wanted to take the opportunity. Here's 30,000 businesses, and a whole infrastructure of an entrepreneurship bank where I can learn from these businesses that have been in the business game for many, many years and have had, sequential successes. And here's all these different experts from venture capital to legal to mezzanine finance to advisory in different areas of a business. And I think it was personally like a great learning journey and exchange in terms of uh, getting that insight or depth while also being able to build a startup within the bank, and then scale that from a team of 4 to a team of 20, where I left. And at the tail end of my experience there, I built the first innovation lab with its cross-functional team in Montreal, and that was super exciting. And I also ran a growth lab where I was able to run digital experiments with different businesses, leveraging different technologies, different tools, different tactics to help their business grow. So all the different assumptions or hypotheses that you come up with as an entrepreneur, uh, we're applying it to real businesses that were, between $1 million to $50 million in revenue, and seeing the metrics and seeing the data, and then coming back and going through these cycles of optimization, which was super exciting and super insightful as well. Right. So I did that about 5 years internally. Uh, so as an internal employee, and then continue to support the product development and delivery teams as an external consultant over the last 2-3 years as well. So it's certainly been one of the a very important part of my personal development journey, and everybody's development journey is different, right? But I think it's being able to embrace the different pathways, right? Going from like doing graphic design to web design to video to custom web development, e-commerce to platforms, to then taking all of those experiences, packaging it, and creating systematic solutions to support other businesses to think through systematically how to become digital, how to go online, how to improve their internal systems, to then taking all the other things that I didn't know outside of digital, outside of technology, or outside of the innovation to commercialization, and better having a better depth of what does it mean to be a great leader, or what does operational efficiency mean, and why is that even important in a business, right? Why do we need to focus on specific key metrics that drive the business forward? How are those metrics associated to the product? How is the product metrics different than the business metrics that drive the business forward, and so on and so forth? And so I think applied learning is key. And um, we've even in the design of uh, what Prepper is offering, right? It's really to emulate um, that real world application of when you're in school, you don't really get the opportunity to kind of apply to a real business case unless your school is case driven, like a Western Ivy or whatever, Schulich. I know that there's a couple of schools that do that case driven approach or capstone approach, and uh, with the federal government, the different provinces now really focusing on applied based learning and making sure every student um, has that experience. I think it's critical. It's so meaningful, right? Like I would have never been able to be an effective digital advisor or a business consultant have I not uh, had gone through the journeys of running my own business, and going through all the different experiences from the time I was 16 to I don't know, I think I was 25 or something when I started at BDC, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sure. So, I mean, I know we have a lot of people who are listening in who either have, are interested in working with sort of some of those small and mid-sized businesses, or are currently working with them, and maybe these are some of their early experiences in their career. What advice would you give them as they're helping these businesses? So I know you developed a lot of solutions for that in terms of building an online presence and then ultimately getting into marketing. So what would be the top 3 things that they should think about when they're working with these types of organizations?
That's a great question. I think the first and foremost is, ask questions, right? Like, don't be afraid to ask questions. When you start any position, you need to genuinely be interested in the business, what you're doing, but also how what you're doing connects to what other people in the organization are doing, so that you can gain an appreciation for what you're bringing into the table and how that impacts the business. And understanding that component, right? Like getting the acumen and getting uh, intimate with the business is important. What that does for you too is it shows the owner or your manager as well that you're genuinely, like, you're taking your job seriously, and that you care about your contribution to that business. So I think that would be the first piece of advice that I would have. Uh, the second is, as you're asking those questions, listen, right? It's one thing to ask the questions, and then it's one thing to kind of try to jump in and you know come up with a solution right away. It's easy to do that. Don't do that, right? Collect the information and listen, and then analyze it and come back and synthesize that information so you can come up with ideas that have been uh, you know uh, fermented, right? Like you need to give it some time to digest the information, analyze it, look at how you can take that information and apply your skills and your capabilities to what you've understood, and then uh, start to chart your way through a solution, right? Or through a project plan of getting whatever it is that you're in there for done, whether it's building out a new website or supporting the enhancements of an e-commerce website. You need to understand the current environment first, analyze that, and then come back with a plan. So I think listening, digesting, and then um, coming back with a plan. Those are key steps, and I think we've covered three, right? So ask key questions, listen, digest, and present a plan. And then don't resist the feedback that you get when you're presenting your plan, and don't be afraid to present your plan, right? Um, I know it's not easy. I mean, I'm by nature an introverted person, right? I don't like standing in front of a room of 100 people, but I'll do it anyways to kind of break through that fear. The good thing is we're living in a remote work and learn. So I don't see any of your faces right now, so I'm not nervous. So it's much easier to do it remotely. So there's benefits of the pandemic from that perspective. Cup half full, right? Um, but if you are still nervous, that's okay. Like, you can practice presenting. One of the things I found helpful when I had uh, basically I hired some consultants to help me kind of improve that whole process of my communication and when I'm being interviewed or whatever the case may be. And recording yourself on your laptop might be a good way. Then you can play back and listen to yourself, and then you can critique yourself, or someone that you're open to hearing their feedback. Uh, Listen to them and hear them out with open ears. That's really the big thing here, open ears, right? Which is a weird concept, but trust me, it's probably the most important lesson in life is having open ears. Because if you don't, you're missing out on a lot of life lessons. And yeah, wise men have open ears. Smart men have a little bit of blockage. They'll fall a couple of times, and then they'll eventually pick up some Q-tips and clean it out so that their ears can open up and they can listen to other people's advice, so they don't have to make the same mistakes twice or thrice. And that's really key. Because when you're in your teens, you can afford to make mistakes. In your early 20s, sure, you can, but when you get to your mid 20s or late 20s, each one of those mistakes can put you in kind of a ripple journey, and sometimes it's hard to kind of turn back the wheels. Um, oh, this person told me I finished computer science, and they told me to, get a side. course in data analytics because that's the future, and you didn't listen. And now, fast forward 5 years later, everybody wants a data scientist, right? Like, and then maybe at that point, 5 years later, you're married and you have a kid and you don't have time to sit and learn a data science course and get another certificate, or you don't have the motivation to do it because you're older and you have more responsibilities, et cetera, et cetera. So take advantage of your 20s, honestly, because once you get into your 30s, you're starting to make bigger life decisions, whatever those may be, to whoever they are. It's different for everybody, but in your 20s, you can explore and learn as much as you want. Learning doesn't end, right? Like, it's lifelong learning, but you need to have the passion and the motivation and the inspiration to want to continue to learn. And then there's people like me that are trying to trick you to learn with points and badges and game mechanics so that you become a lifelong learner and problem solver. All right, back to you, Kate.
So, I mean, we talked a bit about your journey, and it certainly has covered a lot of ground. Even I mean, we've talked previously about this idea of the T-shaped individual, right? Someone who has a lot of breadth and then also depth in a number of categories, and I think you really do exemplify that. But is there anything that you wish you'd done differently when starting your career? When you look back, is there anything that like even advice, things that you wished you had listened to or just thought about differently early on?
Yeah, yeah. I wish I opened my ears like maybe 3 years earlier because I would have done so many more things sooner, right? Like I think my ears started to like really open wide in 2008, and I started my entrepreneurial journey in like 2005. So 2005, 2006. So those 3 years, if I'd opened my ears wider, I think it would have let more in. So I think that's one, right? Like really taking, taking a step back and then, bringing in more advisors, right? Like a good advisor is invaluable, guys. Like that's the most yeah, it's you know um, and I've had some really great advisors over the last 12 years since 2008 when I realized like it clicked for me. I'm like, oh, and then things I never looked back, and once a month I'll check in with my advisors, different advisors, legal, accounting, strategy, marketing, machine learning, whatever, right? Whatever you need and whoever is important, find an advisor. It's not that hard, right? LinkedIn is where it's at today. Like 2020, there's over 10 million people just in Canada on LinkedIn. So sending a message to someone and saying, hey, you have 15 minutes, you can check to see what they're wanting to do. If someone says pro bono volunteering, you can send them a quick message and say, can you be my mentor? And I'm having difficulty, or I need some more clarity. I see you being in this role. I think I want to be in that role. You're a senior product manager at Microsoft. I think I want to do that. I don't know. Maybe you're a site ops at Google. Maybe I want to do that. Or maybe you're a recommendation engine expert at, I don't know, Facebook. And maybe I want to do that. Whatever the case is, right? Like now it's the world has become flat, right? Everyone's accessible with via internet, social media. Um, Surround yourself with advisors, right? You don't need to go out there if you're not comfortable going face to face and asking people. I think that's probably the most critical thing. And yeah, I think that I would have started that process earlier. And yeah, I think that's probably, and then the other thing too is reflecting is not taking on too much, right? Like, and learning project management sooner. I really learned project management, I think like 2009 is where I like really had a deep appreciation for it. And then I became a preacher of project management from like 2009 till now. Like, yeah, project management is more important than your degree. And I'll say that. And it doesn't cost that much money. Your degree costs you $50,000. Project management doesn't cost you $50,000, but it's probably the most important skill that you'll learn to use across your entire career. There's no job that you're ever going to have that doesn't require project management, right? And so understanding project management is probably like, one of the lines in the T shape. If your goal is to become a T-shaped individual, that's one of the areas, right? Because the other two core expertise that you have are going to be amplified with how well you understand what you're committing to, right? Like I didn't understand scope, time, cost, triple constraints, right? Like I would plan out a development project like a platform. When we built the franchise management platform, it was a project that we wanted to do in 8 months, and it ended up taking over a year. And it was because we were overzealous, and we didn't involve everybody in the time estimation. And it's part art, part science. You got to practice it, and it's one of those things that you'll never be a master project manager because you always learn something new, and it's a skill that's like leveraging or managing your time, right? Managing what you commit to. Project leadership in the pie loop right here is all about project management, right? It's all about, and there's different styles of it, right? Everybody's talking agile right now, but before it was the PMI model, the Project Management Institute, and I think you guys already had a lecture on project management, but yeah, project management and open ears. Those are kind of the
Mm,
two things. I would have started 3 years earlier.
good advice. I mean, a lot of what you've learned, you've also taught yourself. Tell us a little bit about your ongoing learning. How do you stay on top of the trends, I guess, in the areas that you're already in, and then when you have to learn something new? Like I know, DevOps wasn't something that you studied or like learned in school. When it comes to either sort of like big things that you really need to tackle, what's your approach there versus just sort of incremental, staying on top of the other areas that you already follow?
That's a good question. I think, um, and this is something that I've been trying to tackle systematically with the Prepper network and, the technology that we're building, but like creating passionate learners or like triggering passion and people to want to learn is something that's always been an interesting challenge for me. I grew up in a library. Like when we moved to Canada, my dad was a radio oncologist. So, he was studying for his medical equivalency exam to practice medicine in Canada. So he would take me to the library while he was studying for the exam. I would be in the library, and the library was like this open world of no, there's all these books. I would check out so many books on everything. I was just inspired. Astronomy, Isaac Newton, physics, Thomas Edison, all this stuff. Bill Gates' CD, like Microsoft Systems Certified Systems Engineer. It was like a book this big. And my dad, I was like, I don't know, I was like 11 years old. My dad would get these books and it's like, explore this, or like playing around with it in Carta. And I think this just the passion for knowledge for me just made me kind of a bookaholic in a way. Like I buy more books and download more books than I can consume. It's just something that's been there. But I think going back to the example from Japan Camera, right? It's one of the things that I distilled in analyzing this is it's the challenge. If I'm passionate about the challenge, then I'll seek the knowledge to solve the challenge. I didn't know DevOps, but I realized we reached a certain point in our development infrastructure and the next stage of growth and efficiency required me to have a better understanding of DevOps and managing pipelines and test automation and security automation to scale what we're building. And so, you know, um, I think that's a key thing in like understanding, well, what do you need as you're working through a project or as you're working through a challenge that um, you've undertaken. um, seeking the knowledge that you need, and then like being genuinely, I think, interested, right? For me, like everything is kind of like a spider web, or like as data scientists call it, a neural network. I used to have like spider web drawings or like mind map drawings of all the different things and components that I needed for a particular project. And then that would interest me in wanting to learn more about that thing so that even if I'm not doing it, I don't want to look like I didn't do my homework in front of my teammates if I'm looking for a teammate to take on that part of the project, or in case something goes south and that teammate is not able to do that piece. Let's say I'm a coder and I need a marketer or a designer. I don't want to fall short in not understanding, just in case the coder flakes or the designer flakes on me and I need to submit this project in 24 hours to a customer or to a professor or to whoever's evaluating that project, and not be able to finish it and bring it across the finish line because I was obsessive. I don't like being late on anything. It bothers me on my conscience, and so yeah, I think that's, and everybody has their own triggers. I think the important thing is to introspect and really look at what triggers you, look at what kind of turns on that switch for you. It's not your parents. Some people, that's the reverse switch of their parents constantly telling them, and maybe it turns the switch the other way where they don't want to do it because they're being told by their parents to do it, or by someone else that maybe, for whatever reason, or maybe it is. Maybe for some people it's the opposite, and they have open ears, and maybe that's something that they appreciate. Everybody's different, right? For me, the switch was, being in that library, growing up with Encarta. Before we bought a car, we bought a computer, and I had the Encarta CD, and I would sit on Encarta hours on a day and just like browse through all types of information because I just loved learning how much I don't know. And it's still the same way. I don't know anything, right? Like even though I know stuff, I still realize like knowledge is exponential, and so it's really interesting to kind of um, continue to learn from others. I mean, like, what's the point of life if you're not learning, right? And whatever you do.
Yeah, I think that you raised a really good point earlier about like the challenge being the impetus or the thing that sets you down that learning path in a lot of cases. And we all have those moments, right? But in many ways, it's whether you're open to it or not, whether you see that as like something exciting and an opportunity, or whether it just seems like a burden. And just recognizing those challenges as like new opportunities to learn, to evolve, to grow, because stuff changes so fast. It changes
Yeah,
so fast, especially in the industries that all of you are in or like looking to get into. What is true today is probably not going to be true in 5 years. And so the only way you can survive is to keep learning.
absolutely. I think, on that point too, Caitlin, it's, there's two sides to it, right? Like there's the hard kind of skills that they refer to, like things that are technical, or like you can pick up a book, or like um, you can read through examples, et cetera, right? And then there's the soft kind of, int- excuse me, like intrapersonal, or like, things that you need to practice, right? Like your communication, like you can read about communication, but if you're not communicating, then you're really not. Like I remember I told you guys I'm by nature an introvert, and I think, when was it? Like this was 2010. I did a social experiment on myself where like I challenged myself for a week to go up to any stranger and carry a conversation for 5 minutes. It was a weird, like I just looked down, like, okay, I'm gonna do this. This challenge ended up causing me to like pack a suitcase at like 1 o'clock in the morning and drive all the way to New York and continue to do this from Toronto to New York City to Boston and back. And because of this experiment, I ended up in the halls of MIT, and I started a conversation with somebody in MIT, and they had their annual tech fair, and that's actually where Prepper launched. I did this challenge on myself, a social challenge or like a social experiment on improving my personal communication skills and like not breaking the fear of speaking to strangers. And it just opened up such a diverse conversation. I met people from Pearson, McGraw-Hill Publishing on the streets of Boston. I would, go to different places and I would just start a conversation. I had the most amazing because I made myself. It's a crazy thing. Why would you do that, right? But I did it, and it opened me to a lot of interesting human experiences and connections, and yeah, and then we ended up. This was October of 2010, and January 2011 we launched Prepper at MIT. You can watch the videos on YouTube. You can see me, the younger me, probably like 50 pounds lighter. But yeah, I mean, don't be like there's both sides to it, and I think there's the hard skills. Like you can subscribe to a bunch of stuff, take Coursera courses, subscribe to ebooks, Safari books, whatever. There's so many. If you're seeking the knowledge, it's there, right? We are one search query away, and um, that part is easy. And then there's the stuff that's hard, which is what you're doing. Like going through the FUM program is not easy. It's hard. And you're building the soft skills by practicing your hard skills. And it's very much it's been designed as an experiment for you to do everything that, we've learned over a course of 10 years in 5 weeks and then continue to practice it. So I think um, that's really exciting in a way if you're open to it and embrace it and fully take it on. There's a lot that you can take from it, but it's your opportunity at the end of the day, and you can do with it what you will.
Yeah, absolutely. So just as we wrap up, any parting advice or wisdom for new developers, marketers, designers, people getting started in their careers?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned, like continuous learning, like go out and subscribe to 50 different things on an email that is not your primary email, right? Like I probably have more than 100 subscriptions to all the different topics that I'm interested in, right? And those come in and they go into the social tab in my Google inbox, and I check them whenever I have time and I want to take a 5-10 minute break. I'll flip through, right? Like don't be afraid to download ebooks and sit in on other webinars and just do wide area learning and don't narrow your vision. I think that's key. Keep keep your ears open, and always seek an advisor that you can kind of leverage wherever you need that support. You need to introspect, and don't be shy. Like half of learning is understanding where your gaps are, right, and being kind of true to yourself. Like I'm not afraid to say I'm introverted, but I can switch that with a flick of a switch, and I can be extroverted if I need to be because I have to be. And that's not my comfort zone, but that's what's needed of me. And so I'll have to switch gears. And so that's kind of understanding where your knowledge gaps are or where your personal kind of shortcomings are. And then you can kind of focus and game plan on improving the areas where you're good or like you have a lot of passion towards it, and then figuring out other ways to close the gap on areas that maybe you're not so good, and that's okay. Not everybody's good in everything, right? um,
Mm-hmm.
that's really the key to um, you know being able to kind of progress in your career and yeah, learn how to grow as an individual.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Salar, for your time today and sharing your wisdom. I'm sure it was really insightful for all of the participants. And yeah, we will wrap up. And thanks again.
Perfect. Thanks for having me. And good luck, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.